have you ever noticed how gaming tends to be rather samey? I mean, if you switch between games from the same genre, you kind of already know what to expect before you even start playing. So today, I'm going to give you a list of games that are weird, unique, or bizarre for you to check out. So, let's get started! This is Chaos Seed Feng Shui Chronicles for the Super Nintendo, and this is a weird one. At first, Chaos Seed looks like your typical 16-bit action RPG, where you fight monsters, have a variety of moves, level up, collect gear, that kind of stuff. But hold on there, cowboy, because this game is actually a dungeon management sim similar to Dungeon Keeper, where you have to excavate the various dungeons and clear them of monsters and rubble, and then use that free space to create buildings. But you cannot just excavate willy-nilly, because you also have to select how tall and wide each room is, and different rooms will have different elements depending on their size and where you place them. And these elements will determine what kind of buildings you can place on them. These will range from production facilities that will give you different resources, to traps that damage enemies, as well as excavation and storage sites where you can collect and store items. But arguably the most important ones are the summoning rooms, where you summon monsters to serve you. You can create parties of different monster types and combinations, and you then give them different tasks like defending your lands, repairing damaged buildings, or distributing your resources among the various rooms that require said resources to function. And throughout all of this, you'll also have to upgrade your buildings to get more resources and faster, or to summon a wider variety of monsters. And throughout all of this, your lands will often be invaded by either monsters or human soldiers, and you'll have to take them down and defend your lands. And as you defeat them, you and your monsters level up, and you can even equip them with new items. And some of these battles can get pretty large for the Super Nintendo, as you can have up to 3 monsters on your main party, but you can also have other parties defending your base and helping out your main party in the main battle. And just as you fought your second boss battle and think you finally gotten the hang of Chaos Seed, the game throws a fastball at you. Well, it turns out that now is when the game actually begins and gives you a proper intro, because Chaos Seed is all about parallel universes and multiple endings. So you're going to have different levels with diverging storylines depending on how you perform in each scenario and each timeline. This game is just incredible, and it's so unique and diverse that I honestly cannot think of anything that even comes close to it. I know that I compare this game to Dungeon Keeper, but this game is clearly doing its own thing and breaking genre molds for both RPGs and strategy games. Just please, I beg you, go play this game. It's so worth it. This is Pinball Quest, a unique game for the NES that combines pinball with RPG. Basically, you have 3 pinball tables to choose from, and these are just your standard pinball tables. Honestly, there's nothing too interesting about these. I mean, they're not bad, but they're a far cry from Pinball Fantasies for the Amiga or Devil's Crush on the Mega Drive and PC Engine. But then you get to the RPG mode and it's exactly as it sounds. Now, you're in a pinball game with RPG elements, and it even has a storyline. The princess of the kingdom is kidnapped, and you are the valiant pinball knight who has to rescue her. So you need to clear tables, talk to NPCs, defeat enemies, bosses, collect keys, and open doors by using your pinball skills. You even get to visit a shop where you trade points for items like better ball paddles or different stoppers. But if you do not have enough money, you can risk stealing a random item. And you use these items by opening up a menu and selecting which items from your inventory you want to use and where you want to use them. Like for example, where do you want to set up your stoppers? And you even level up as you play the game, as shown by your attack stats, which increases the barrier you perform, causing more damage to enemies and barriers. But it can also go down if you fumble a ball. And because these tables tend to be on the large side, you'll often need to move your pedals up or down on the table as you move on forward. This is a pretty interesting idea, but it does have one major issue that can break the game for some. And that is, if you lose a ball, rather than continuing where you left off, you're sent to the previous table. Now granted, everything that you cleared in the previous table stays cleared, so doors will stay open and the conditions required to get the keys will automatically be met. But it's still a hassle having to fight your way up again, only to fumble again and being sent back again. I feel like they should have given you a few attempts before kicking you back, but overall, yeah, I enjoyed this one. Check it out if you can. This is Future Cop LAPD for the original PlayStation, a pretty awesome third-person shooter where you control a mech that can transform into a hover car, and you then go around doing missions taking out bad guys. This is a pretty awesome game, and it actually originally began as an offshoot of the Desert Strike series, but that's besides the point. The main campaign, while excellent, is also a fairly normal third-person shooter in terms of innovation. But we're not here for the main campaign. Oh no.
This is Precinct Assault.
We're here for Precinct Assault, an optional mode that is honestly even more fun than the main game itself. And the weird thing is that no one actually mentions this mode. Like, I've seen reviews of this game that are nearly an hour long, which barely spend 5 minutes talking about this mode, even though it's arguably better than the main campaign. So, what is Precinct Assault? Well, it's a mode where you and your enemy start out with a base and you must now go around the map and claim neutral turrets to defend your territory. And as you claim turrets or defeat enemies, you gain points, which can then be used to buy smaller bases or send out an army of tanks and helicopters. And while you do all of this, your enemy will be doing the same. So now the goal is to get one of your tanks into the enemy base. And let me tell you, this mode is super addicting. For one thing, you can select your mech loadout, with all of the weapons from the main campaign already unlocked, though you can still unlock an additional 3 secret weapons if you know where to look. Not only that, but throughout the maps you'll find health and ammo boosts, as well as upgrades to your main weapons. And as you unlock more points, you can build more powerful units like the Dreadnought tank or the Sky Fortress airplane. In fact, this mode kinda feels like a 32-bit sequel to Herzog's Wife for the Mega Drive. And let me tell you, when you launch a full assault on the enemy base where you're destroying tanks, helicopters and turrets while being backed by a pretty large army of your own, that's when Future Cop is at its best. In fact, in my opinion, the Precinct Assault mode in Future Cop LAPD is the best multiplayer experience on the original PlayStation. Of course, if you're just playing by yourself like I am, you'll go against Sky Captain, who is super easy at first, but as you move up the ladder, he becomes way harder. Sadly though, you cannot unlock the harder levels automatically, you need to clear the easier ones first. Seriously though, if you get the chance, go play Future Cop and for once, skip the main campaign and give Precinct Assault a whirl. This is basically 2 games in one, and the one game people never talk about is the best one. Seriously, go check it out. Wade Hixton's Counterpunch is a punch-out style game for the Game Boy Advance, and despite the way it looks, no, this game is not based on any cartoon series, it's a fully original property. And that's really why I picked this game, because the art style and motion makes it so unique for the system. Okay, so the story goes that you're Wade Hixton, who's a bit of a bumpkin, and your car breaks down in the middle of nowhere. So now you go around doing various street boxing matches for money while you wait for your car to be repaired. So you have a map to explore where you'll fight various characters and make money. And you can use that money to buy upgrades for Wade or new hats for the ref. Of course, once I discovered this hat for the ref, I didn't see the point in buying more. Perfection was already achieved. One cool thing about this game, besides the animation, is that those upgrades you buy are special moves, and you can use them to your advantage. And the story and character designs are pretty fun, but also super early to mid-2000s in style. I mean, you even have an enemy that is literally just Snoop Dogg. Although I will say, that final boss is freaking impossible. Like, jeez, I can't even get a single punch in. Overall though, the game is fine, I guess. It's not bad, but it does wear out its welcome, and it expects you to grind quite a bit to get those upgrades. It's a cool game, and I would have liked to have seen a sequel. But there's quite a bit of room for improvement here. This is Major Havoc, a 1983 arcade game by Atari, and as you can see, the game uses vector-based graphics, which in of itself is fairly uncommon, but that's not why I picked this game. Okay, so this game is a hodgepodge of different genres all rolled into one. For one thing, at the start of each mission you play a round of Pong, and if you manage to clear the board, you gain an extra life. Once that's done, the game then becomes a shmup similar to Galaga or Galaxian, where you need to take out every enemy. And once that's done, you now need to land your ship on the space station. After that, the game then becomes a platformer, where you need to deal with the floating gravity controls, collect oxygen to extend your timer, avoid traps, and reach the station score. Though luckily, you can use this handy minimap to guide yourself to the station. And your only means of defense is your personal shield, which can block some projectiles or defeat a single enemy before it runs out of power. Once you reach the power core, you set the station to self-destruct, and you must now find your way back to the ship before the station explodes, where the cycle begins again. Except now, the game throws variations at you. So for example, some shmup segments are now actually closer to a traditional shmup, where you defeat enemies and scroll up through a maze. And you can either destroy the maze's walls or destroy the enemies that build the maze, giving you more breathing room. And the platforming levels suddenly become more complex as well, because now you'll need to collect keys and also have one-way passages. This is honestly such a cool game, and it's a shame that it's not talked about more often. And you really gotta love the neon light spectacle that comes from playing a game that uses vector-based graphics. So I say, check it out if you can. This is Kingdom Grandprix for the Sega Saturn and arcades, though I'll be playing the Saturn version here. And this game is a very unique combination of a shmup with a racing game. So the idea is, you pick from one of 7 racers, each with their own weapons and power-up loadout, but also different max speeds. And from there on, you need to play a shmup level while also trying to win a race. So for example, as the level progresses, you can see your opponents trying to catch up or outrun you. And you can crash against them to try and knock them out or delay their progress. In fact, the start of every level is pure chaos because everyone is crashing against everyone. Though, take this pro tip from me and just use a screen clearing bomb as soon as the level begins. That way, your opponents are delayed a bit. And the idea of the game is, when you're on the top portion of the screen, your accelerator goes up, which will then cause you to speed up and either catch up to those ahead of you or put some distance to anyone behind you. But the lower you go on the screen, the lower your speed goes, which in turn means you'll start to lose the race. thankfully, the game is very kind with power-ups and smart bombs, as they're always popping up, and it's a good idea to be well stocked with upgrades, because levels also have bosses, and you need to defeat them to get past them, ideally without losing a life, which will cost you power-ups. After all, you're trying to survive, yes, but you're also trying to win a race. The game does let you progress even if you reach last place, but the overall tally is counted, and you'll eventually reach a point where the game halts your progress if your rank isn't high enough, so you gotta be careful. I will say that this game leans much more on the shmup side of things than the racing side, but still, this is a pretty unique take on the genre, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone try this concept before or since. And the game is pretty fun as well, so I say check it out if you can. This is Wetrix for the Nintendo 64, and this is basically a 3D Tetris with water, and it's a really weird concept to grasp at first. Okay, so the idea is, you place the blocks on the ground to create little tanks or lakes. And if you place pieces on top of existing pieces, your lake walls will become higher. After that, the game starts giving you water droplets and you need to place them on your lakes to fill them without spilling over. So what happens is, the more water spills outside of the map, the closer you are to a game over. And you need to build as many lakes and interconnect them as possible without spilling water. And I gotta say, the water physics are surprisingly decent for the Nintendo 64.
In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics!
As the water level rises or lowers, the physics do a really good job at following the many possible paths, and the game will start warning you when water is flowing outside of the game map, as well as tell you where it's flowing from. The game will also give you power-ups and power-downs, like arrows that lower the grounds, making your lake walls lower, fireballs which dry water and give you some much-needed respite, and bombs which punch a hole through the floor, causing all water to flow out of the map and nearly giving you an instant game over. Wetrix also has challenge and even pro modes, but I'll be honest here, I am absolutely terrible at this game. But I know a lot of people who absolutely love it, and to be fair, I get it. It's a really cool mix of Tetris with puzzle physics, and it forces you to make constant split-second decisions. I'm not very good at it, but check it out if you can. This is the frog for whom the bell tolls for the Nintendo Game Boy, and it's a super unique game. You play as a prince whose best friend and rival is the Prince of Custard, but the beautiful Princess Tiramisu is in trouble, and the two of you go off on a rivalry over who can save her first. And at first, this seems like a Zelda clone, which, I mean, I guess it kind of is, but the combat is nothing like Zelda. Instead, combat is a turn-based affair where you have no control of what happens other than using items, switching weapons, or running away, and you do not gain experience for defeating enemies. However, if you're way stronger than your foes, then you automatically defeat them without entering combat. This actually gives the game an almost puzzle-like feel to combat, as you know that sometimes there's a limited number of enemies you can defeat without losing, and so it's a good idea to walk past their patterns. But then, you also have certain segments that play in a side view, similar to the Game Boy Zelda games, or Zelda 2 if you prefer, but with a much bigger focus on platforming. And you'll also find items and weapons that help you progress through the game, like a saw that can cut down trees, but can also be used against tree-like enemies. But then, you also gain the ability to turn into a frog whenever you enter water. And while you're a frog, you can automatically defeat bug-like foes, talk to other frogs, walk underwater, and jump really high. But you cannot talk to humans or defeat most enemies. And you do not turn back into a human when you leave the water. But then, you also gain the ability to turn into a snake whenever you eat an egg. But then, you also gain the ability to turn back into a human whenever you eat a certain fruit. So the game then becomes a balancing act between getting eggs and fruit to change between human and snake forms while being on the lookout for water sources to turn into a frog when you need it or avoid turning into one when you don't want to. And you use the upsides of each transformation as you switch between them. I swear, this is such a fever dream of a game, which, by the way, fever dreams are a running gag with this game's plot. But honestly, this game is so weird and unique that I cannot help but to recommend it. Seriously, check this one out. This is Dungeons & Dragons Birthright, the Gorgon's Alliance for MS-DOS computers, and I love this game. So this game is part grand strategy, part tactics, and part first-person RPG all rolled into one. You pick from a wide selection of nobles and regions you'd like to take control of, with each one having certain strengths and weaknesses, like a stronger army, better economy, that sort of thing. And the game basically has three modes: the world map, the army combat, and the RPG mode. In the world map, you need to manage your lands by collecting taxes, creating armies, and infrastructure. But the game really lets you play the political game if you want. I mean, for one thing, you cannot just control a region by conquering it. Instead, you need to create some sort of political claim over the land. Or you can just bribe local guild leaders to destabilize them. Or, you can just form alliances and declare war on someone. That works too. Once you go into battle, the game then becomes a real-time tactical game where you move your unit groups across the map. And if one of your leaders is present, you can even use their magical abilities or items if they have any. But now, here's where the game becomes truly unique. You see, every now and again, optional quests will pop up, and when this happens, the game then becomes a first-person RPG where you select your party from your available heroes and then go on missions which can range from retrieving a certain item to defeating someone. And as you fight enemies, your heroes will level up, which in turn makes them more powerful during army battles. Not only that, but any gear and magical equipment they find can be used in those army battles, and any gold you find in these quests will go towards your kingdom's treasury to finance your war efforts. Yes, I am literally financing my army by stealing spoons and knives and then selling them. And if you successfully complete a quest, you'll get special items that can grant bonuses like increased tax revenue. It's kinda crazy to think that with all the Total War games and other similar titles we've had since, no other game has ever taken the time to give you a full RPG portion which actually influences the overworld map. Sadly, this game is notorious for being super buggy, so I recommend keeping multiple save slots. But yeah, check this one out, it's worth it.
Stand right there and identify yourself. Ready your dispatch!
This is Rescue the Embassy mission for the NES, and it's basically the Rainbow Six games before Rainbow Six even existed. So, you need to rescue people from an embassy, and your mission has a timer, and no matter what you do, this timer is always counting down. It does not matter if you're in different parts of the mission or selecting which operative you want to play next. That timer will keep counting down, and you have to finish the mission before it reaches 0. So, the mission begins with a stealth portion where you need to get multiple operatives to certain locations on the map. To do this, you need to avoid searchlights either by hiding behind doors or ledges, rolling on the ground, or crawling. If you're spotted, they'll start firing at you. And to be fair, their aim is inconsistent, but it's not a good idea to risk it anyway. And you can open up a map to see how far away you are from your goal, or if you've actually gone too far. Once that happens, and depending on how many operatives operatives reach their destinations, you can now select multiple sniping positions. Here, you have to check the building windows for foes and take them down. And any enemies you defeat here will not be available in the next portion of the mission. Not only that, but different sniping positions will have different enemies available, so it's a good idea to check every position available and take out as many foes as you can. Once that's done, you now need to rappel from the rooftop and onto the windows to enter the building. And depending on which point of entry you've chosen, you can even find broken windows that you broke during the sniping sessions. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're broken or not, but it's a cool attention to detail. And once you're inside, the game then becomes a sort of first-person shooter, I guess? During this segment, you have a map that tells you where you are, what direction you're facing, and where the enemies are, as well as the people you have to rescue. And now, you must take everyone out while rescuing civilians before the timer runs out. Yeah, remember that part? That timer's still going, and it's getting pretty tight now, isn't it? And the interesting thing is that even if you do complete your mission, it can still end in disaster because one of your stray shots can hit a civilian, if you even fire in their general vicinity, even if they're not in front of you. Like, damn, this is a pretty ambitious game for the NES. It almost feels like a modern indie game for the system, but no! This was launched in 1999, and there's really nothing quite like it for any other 8-bit or 16-bit console that I can think of. I will say though that this game is not as deep as it first makes you think it is. If you really boil it down, this is a series of mini-games that are interconnected towards a larger goal, and failing or succeeding at one of those mini-games can make the rest of your playthrough tougher or easier. Unfortunately, it has one major flaw, and that is that there's only one mission. Yes, what you saw here was the whole game. The idea is, you select different missions which are basically difficulty settings, but the maps, minigames, and the order in which you do them are all the same. Which means that the game is really about 20 minutes long once you figure out what to do, and from there on, it's solely reliant on you wanting to play it again on a harder difficulty. But still, this is a pretty fun game if you have an hour or two to burn. But if it had an actual campaign, this would have been an incredible game. As it is though, it's still worth checking out, but keep your expectations in check. This is Rakugaki Showtime for the original PlayStation, and this game is a mix of an open arena 3D fighting game like Power Stone and Dodgeball. Yes, really, this is basically a dodgeball fighting game. So, you can initially select from 4 characters, though you'll unlock more as the game progresses. And yes, this game is made by Treasure, and yes, that's Marina from Mischief Makers. And now, you go around the open arena punching enemies and executing throws. But what you really should be doing is running to the ball or balls and throw them at your foes before they do it to you. The more you throw the smiley ball, the more its mood will change from happy to frowny to powered up, allowing you or your enemies to use special moves. But if you don't have the smiley ball, don't worry, because you can also pick any obstacles along the map and throw them at your foes to damage them or block the ball. And really, you'll be throwing a lot of stuff, all of which has different effects and damage types. So a missile, for example, is slow, but causes a ton of sustained damage, while a rock is more instant and creates a major knockback effect. There's also other effects like these force fields that leaves your enemies defenseless and stranded, so you can just walk up to them and punch them over and over again. And that's basically it, really. From there on, it's a series of 4-player matches across an open area, and this game is super fun, and I assume it's even better with friends. And you really gotta love the crayon aesthetic too, which, believe it or not, actually predates Paper Mario by about a year. But yeah, this is a pretty fun game, so I say, check it out if you can. This is Princess Maker 2 for MS-DOS computers. In this game, you're a hero who saved the kingdom from the demon army, and as a reward, God himself gives you a child. So now, it's your job to raise this 10-year-old girl however you think is best, and the game gives you a ton of options. In fact, back then, I remember reading that this game had 88 possible endings, so that should give you an idea of how much freedom you have. So from here on out, you have to create her schedule and how she earns a living, so you can have her study from multiple career paths like fighting, magic, painting, science, poetry, and decorum. But classes cost money, and money is actually really tight in this game, so you'll have to find her jobs. At first, there's only a few work options available like farming, working at the inn, or housework. But as she gets older, more jobs become available, but the classes she's actually good at also become more expensive. In fact, every schedule you make for her is a full month, and you need to mold her into a well-balanced adult by the time she turns 18. One cool thing about this game is that if you teach her fighting or magic, you can send her out on adventures, where she'll explore dungeons, fight enemies in turn-based battles, and collect loot. But the thing is, all of these dungeons and quests are optional. You can actually finish the entire game and get a really good ending without ever going on a quest. In fact, if you choose for her to focus her studies on art, science, writing, or other similar endeavors, there's no point in sending her out because she doesn't have stats to win any battles. Meanwhile, you can also go to the shops to buy weapons and armor for her, or dresses and items that will improve her non-combat abilities. And balancing these stats isn't easy because almost every job or lesson she takes improves one thing but decreases something else. So for example, working on the farm makes her strong but less refined, and the less refined she is, the more inept she'll be at playing the social game or making friends in high places like ministers or the king. But on the other hand, the game has multiple characters and quest lines whose outcomes can depend on you, her stats, or how she chooses to behave. For example, if she's a good fighter, she'll start receiving challenges out in the street. If she's pretty and refined, rich men will offer you money and ask for her hand in marriage. But on the other hand, if you raise her poorly, if she becomes rebellious, or if she leads a sinful life, either by going to seedy bars or defeating too many monsters without any remorse, she can have no morals and even become evil. And in fact, she might run away from you, steal your money, take on multiple lovers. This is a really open-ended game, and the endings reflect this too. I mean, by the end, she could be a general in the king's army, or she can follow in her father's footsteps and become a hero. But she can also have her dreams shattered and become a housewife stuck in a loveless marriage, for example, or a divorcee, or a con artist on the run from the law. She could even become a lady of the night, or a high-priced lady of the night, or if she's really good at it, a full-blown dom. And not gonna lie, some of these bad endings are the most interesting ones, like the one where she becomes the crime boss or the princess of darkness. This is such an interesting game, and it's a real shame how this series never found its footing in the West. But really, you absolutely owe it to yourself to checking this game out. This is The Void, a game launched for PCs in 2008 by Ice Peak Lodge, the same studio behind the Pathologic games. And this is honestly the most unique, interesting, and bizarre game I've ever played in my life. In this game, you're a soul sent to a sort of purgatory only known as the Void. In the Void, there is no color, and color is everything. Color are your health points, color is your ammo, color is your money. It's what you use to create roads to travel between realms, and color are your upgrades. The objective of the game is to travel around the world and choose a patron sister to support by feeding her the colors she needs. So to do this, you'll travel across the realms and collect color plants, which get added to your color pool. But these alone are not enough. You also need to go to gardens and plant colors in trees, which will sprout more colors for you to harvest during the next cycle. And as you feed the various sisters, they'll reward you with hearts, which add new abilities to your character, like a shield, super speed, that sort of thing. But you can also find hearts by exploring the world, and each heart can take a set amount of colors, which will then act as your HP. So the more hearts you have and the more they're filled, the more health you have. Not only that, but filling your hearts with different colors will give you different effects, like how red and green increase your offense and defense respectively. And as if that weren't enough, you actually have two different pools of colors, refined and unrefined colors. And refined colors can be actively used to attack monsters, plant trees to harvest more color in the future, or to donate to the sisters. And in fact, the sisters whom you're trying to save will lie, cheat, and manipulate you into giving them color. And they'll often try to turn you against the others because they know you can only save one of them. Sure, you can partially feed all of them for their hearts and upgrades, but sooner or later, you'll have to make a choice, and they'll try to get you to come to their side by any means necessary. Honestly, between the jank, the dialogue, the depressing tone, and the scenes I'll have to cherry pick to post on YouTube, if there ever was a video game equivalent of a European low-budget art film, The Void would be it. There has really never been any game quite like The Void, and most likely there never will be any game quite like The Void. This game isn't for everyone, but if you want to play a game that is truly different and isn't afraid of being different and mostly succeeds at what it's trying to do, I say you should check out The Void. But remember, this is a cautious recommendation. Your mileage may vary by a lot. This is Power Quest for the Game Boy Color, a game by Sunsoft that mixes fighting games with RPG mechanics. The game takes place in a world that's pretty similar to Metabots, where people buy and collect small mechs and then pit them against one another. So you begin in a city where you can go to a shop to trade robot models or buy parts which will increase your damage output of your special moves, but also give you abilities like recover health or countering special moves. From there on, you need to follow the game's storyline by exploring the city and taking out foes. And now here's the thing, I have a real problem with this game. You see, the fighting game engine is actually top notch. No joke, this could have been one of the best fighting games on the Game Boy, because it's fast, the characters are detailed and well animated, and the hit detection is perfect. It's just a really good fighting game. But there's only 5 characters to choose from, 6 if you count a bonus character, and sure, you can ignore the RPG portion and just go to the versus mode, but with so few fighters and no bosses, you're very likely to get bored. So, what about the RPG portions? Well, that's the problem. There's only one city to explore with about 6 or 7 locations to visit, and you keep going to them over and over again, either to progress the story or grind. And once the story progresses, you'll just have to fight several random battles before you unlock the next segment of the plot. And as if that weren't enough, upgrades start getting really expensive really fast. I mean, the best a random battle can give you is $200, but a lot of these upgrades will cost anywhere between $20,000 and $40,000, so you're expected to grind a lot. But wait, there's more, because this game does not have a save feature. Instead, it uses passwords, which is funny if you're using an emulator, but not so funny if you're actually playing on real hardware. Believe it or not, this was actually the first Game Boy Color game I ever bought as a kid, and I really enjoyed it back then. And to be fair, the fighting is still excellent, but I can't help but feel like how much of a missed opportunity this game was. It feels like the developers had lofty dreams for the game, but were held back. So as a result, you get a good fighting game that is held back by a small character roster and an underdeveloped RPG portion. As it is though, I feel this game is just okay. But it had the potential to be a real hidden gem for the system. This is Samurai Zombie Nation for the NES, and man, this game is a trip. In the far-off year of 1999, an alien asteroid hits Earth and turns people into zombies. So now, the head of a samurai is out for revenge. And by head of a samurai, I mean the actual giant floating head of a dead samurai is flying around the city and destroying everything in its path. I mean, just look at this. Do I even need to say anything else? I think the weirdness speaks for itself. It's kind of funny though how the intro says you're the good guy, out to defeat an alien force that turned people into zombies, but I'm pretty sure this was tacked on at the last moment because that does not explain why you're just destroying the entire city. Heck, I've never heard of a zombie outbreak where the zombies can still pilot a helicopter or a tank. We even get people jumping from buildings crying for help and you just eat them for health. So yeah, let's call a spade a spade. You're the villain here, and the intro was just the developers or the publisher trying to save face. And you know what? I'm okay with that because this game is actually a really fun shmup. The controls are good even if you only get one type of shot, but it does get stronger the more you play. But the real fun here is in just destroying cities and everything in your path. And it's kind of funny how these dudes on a raft and this spandex wearing Sean Connery boss are literally tougher than tanks and helicopters. And of course, you have the iconic boss battle against the Statue of Liberty. Seriously, this game makes no sense and I love it. And also just as surprising is the fact that the graphics are really good for the system. I mean, look at these clouds, they're really well animated for the NES. So yeah, Samurai Zombie Nation isn't the best shmup, but it's a good shmup that is made all the better by its weird-ass theme. Check it out if you can.
Using an Apple II is very easy. The only hard part is getting your kid away from it.
Next up, we have Macintosh games. No, not a Macintosh game, just Macintosh games in general. Yeah, I don't know why I've never seen a major YouTuber cover this, but man, Macintosh games were weird as heck. These games are a mood. Okay, let me try and explain here. This is Wizardry for PC. Okay, wireframe graphics, standard menus, these are all fine. And this is Wizardry for the NES. A nice graphical improvement, but the menus are still standard. But now, this is Wizardry for the Macintosh. I mean, look at it! And I don't mean the colors. It's folders. The game is a series of macOS folders. Do you know how you add characters from the character roster to your party? You're never gonna guess this. You gotta click on the in, which opens a macOS folder called the roster. And then you gotta drag the icons of each character to a different folder called the party. Oh, and you see these buttons up here? They're regular buttons from macOS, similar to the start button in Windows. But in Wizardry, they do things related to the game, like changing the order of your party characters. And if you make a mistake, you get a macOS error message. Imagine if you're playing a PC game and you get a Windows error message telling you to change your weapons. But okay, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe this is just Wizardry, right? Well, here's Might and Magic, and it's the exact same deal. Even the menus and buttons all look the same. And I can literally drag the gameplay window and see the OS behind it. The game is just basically a series of Mac OS folders made to look like a video game. But okay, Let's try another game. How about Shadowkeep? And look, yet again the same thing. A folder called Untitled that you interact with the macOS buttons up top. But maybe you're thinking, okay Stika, but maybe that's just the early RPGs, right? Well, how about adventure games? Remember Shadowgate for the NES? Classic, right? Well, here's Shadowgate for the Macintosh. Do you want to pick up an item? Well, you gotta drag it from your gameplay window to a macOS folder called Inventory. And if you want to use it, you then do the reverse. Same goes for Uninvited, another well-liked NES game, but the Mac version. I mean, look at this! Look at the absolute chaos of folders I have in my UI, because I have the inventory folder, the trench folder, the movement folder, and the gameplay window folder, and the folder that I use to click on the icon to run this game. And you can even resize open and close folders. Like, this is insane! And these games are not as old as you might think. I mean, Shadowkeep here is from 1992. The Super Nintendo was already a year old in the West by this point. Now granted, some games actually do away with the folder-on-folder gameplay style. But man, I swear, Macintosh games are such a mood. And it's kind of funny too, because this folder-on-folder gameplay style has now become fairly popular for indie games, as seen on Needy Girl Overdose and Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. But man, it's crazy to think early Macintosh games were doing this, and ironically, for years. Because no other computer did this as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I guess you just had to be there. But this aesthetic is kind of amazing and I love it. But I think I'd rather just watch gameplay videos on YouTube rather than doing it myself, because getting a Mac emulator to run is the bane of my soul. But I'll tell you what's not a bane on my soul: Maken X.
Maken, Deus Ex Machina.
This is Maken X for the Sega Dreamcast, a first-person sword-fighting game by Atlas of all studios. Well, actually that's not too surprising. The art style fits the PS1 era Atlas style, and the story literally makes no sense, so yeah, I guess it is an Atlas game. I don't know, something about souls and the European Union.
The core of the soul. Face what's inside of you. This is the time to find out what's inside your heart. The future's in flux. A time of choices, decisions to make. There are those who will oppose you. The decay of the European Union.
Honestly, these cutscenes went on for so long that I kind of lost interest. Thankfully, the game is actually quite fun. Basically, you need to fight enemies using your sword while in first person. You can use the standard 3-hit combo, block attacks, charge attacks, and jump behind enemies and hit them in their back for critical hits. That in of itself is already pretty unique for a Japanese game. But hold on, we're not done yet. You see, as the game progresses, you also gain the ability to brainjack enemies, which basically means you now get to control them, and different enemies have different stats, attack styles, and special moves. Also, characters have something called the BJ rank. I don't know what it is, but man, they really couldn't have picked a better name for it. The first enemy you control is mandatory, but from there on, you start running into optional characters to control, and these will also have an impact on the story. So for example, at the end of level 2, I found this character. I didn't know who he was, so of course I took control, but turns out he actually sucked. So now, I was at level 3 with a pretty terrible character. But at the end of level 3, I met this character who gives me a mission. But instead of taking the mission, I refuse it, attack her, and brainjack her instead. So now, I had a much better character, but I was sent on a different mission. And the game even had a cutscene where the main character asks the player why you did this and why you stole her body. This is actually some pretty cool stuff, and while the combat is pretty janky, it's also really fun. When they're not stuck making Persona and Megami Tensei games, Atlas really knows how to make some very unique and really interesting experiences. I mean, sure, the game isn't perfect, but I think it's worth playing. So I say, check it out if you can. And there you go, a selection of games that are unlike anything else. Are there any games I missed? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, I'd like to thank all my Patreon supporters, including my newest backers, Michael Spencer Jr., Sophicious, Nicholas Zimmerman, Roy Batiste, and Braylon Rodriguez. Thank you for helping make the channel better. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!